The ship floated in dead space, silent and massive, wrapped in scorched alloys and unknown metals that shimmered under the system's dying sun. No beacon, no signal, no movement, just a black hull wider than a moon and older than any known design. It wasn't supposed to be here. It couldn't be here. The Crescent Dawn, a reconnaissance vessel of the Yalari Coalition, had stumbled on the structure while charting ancient trade routes abandoned after the fall of Sector 9. Most ruins out here were wreckage, radiation-bleached skeletons of old battles. But this thing, it was untouched. It looked like it had waited. Lieutenant Aneri clicked her mandibles nervously. Scan it again. Her crew, a mix of nervous Koran engineers and 2 silent Drevi observers, ran overlapping spectrals, energy pulses, molecular reads. The ship remained black to their tech, opaque, shielded, old. No life signs, no drive signatures, hull material unknown, and... The lead tech paused. There's no identification markers in any known galactic registry. Anari turned her gaze back to the view screen. Send a probe. The small orb zipped out of the Crescent Dawn, blinking blue as it approached the derelict. It made it halfway before it froze. The blinking stopped. It spun once, then was crushed like paper, crumpled by an invisible force, and drifted dead into the void. Silence fell across the bridge. That shouldn't be possible, one of the Drevi whispered. That was Class 4 shielding. Could it be defensive AI? Anari asked. No signal, no heat, no EM fields. No AI pings, it's dead. It wasn't, and they all knew it. 12 hours later, they sent a boarding crew. No weapons, no armor, only scanners, translators, and soft steps. The Coalition didn't believe in violence during first contact. Not after the Multhal massacre. Not after the Yolari incident. They'd learned. But they hadn't learned about humans. No one had. Boarding Team 1 entered through a breach on the lower hull. It was massive, wide enough for a dropship. Yet the interior was unscarred. No signs of battle, no signs of time. The walls were smooth, dark, absorbing every bit of light they shined. Their voices echoed strangely in the comms, longer than they should. Every footstep sounded just a little off. The ship is wrong, muttered Grok, a junior scout. It feels like it's watching us. The squad leader, Valen, ignored him. No signs of atmosphere, but interior temperature is stable. Gravity. Artificial. Consistent. They walked in silence past empty corridors and dark bulkheads. Every corner felt lived in. But there was no one. No trash, no decay, no bones. Just clean emptiness, like someone had left and meant to return. And then they found the door. Massive. Black. Marked with glyphs no translator could crack. But one symbol stood out, centered, burned into the metal. Humanity, WAD Class 3 Deathworld Operations. The room fell silent. That's impossible, Velen whispered. Humanity is extinct, has been for 600 cycles. Grok backed away. We should leave, right now. Valen stared at the symbol. Scan it, log it, then... The door hissed, opened. Inside, light, cold white, too bright. Empty chamber, circular, with a single object in the center. A chair, facing away. And in that chair, someone was sitting, back straight. Still. Humanoid silhouette. No breathing detected. No movement. But they all heard it. Soft and calm, like it came from inside their heads. You shouldn't have come here. No one moved. The voice had not come through their comms. It bypassed their translators. It didn't match any known frequency or wavelength. It just was, direct, invasive, and utterly human. Confirm the audio source, Valen barked, but her voice trembled. There's no source, the tech whispered, eyes wide. Nothing's transmitting, it just exists. The figure in the chair didn't turn. Still backlit by the sterile white light that hummed unnaturally, it sat perfectly still. Upright, hands possibly resting on the armrests. The room was bare except for that one seated silhouette, and the black ring etched into the floor, surrounding the chair like a containment mark. Grok stepped forward, his nerves trembling beneath his armored suit. "Are we speaking to a remnant AI?" There was a pause, too long, too deliberate. "Designation, remnant is incorrect," the voice replied. "I am not artificial, I am not remnant, I am legacy." The door behind them slid shut with a hiss that felt too final. Everyone spun around. Valen cursed. "No signal. We've lost the external link," someone said. "Our exit is locked." Before Valen could order manual override, the voice spoke again. "You have boarded a Class 3 Deathworld vessel. You are not authorized. This ship is under sovereign control by a recognized Terran operator. Unauthorized presence constitutes breach of war protocol." The temperature dropped 10 degrees instantly. Grok checked his HUD, his teeth clenched. It just dropped. Again. And I think the oxygen's thinning. Intentionally. Valen tried to stay calm. "We come in peace. We believed this vessel was abandoned. We are members of the Yalari Coalition, under the flag of interstellar peacekeeping. We apologize for the intrusion and will exit immediately." Silence. Then, "Peace is a luxury of the naive. Humanity abandoned that illusion long ago." Valen narrowed her eyes. "You are human?" This time the answer came faster and colder. "I was." Back on the Crescent Dawn, chaos was spreading. The boarding team's signal had vanished, but the vessel's vitals still registered them as alive. Barely. No damage, no transmissions, no requests for extraction. Commander Threx, a hardened Yalari with decades of war experience, stood on the bridge with clenched mandibles. "Attempt physical override of the link. Use quantum tunneling if needed. I want contact now." "But sir," the comms officer started. "Now." The moment they tried to tunnel back into the black vessel's network, the Crescent Dawn shuddered violently. Every light on the ship dimmed for a fraction of a second. Then a message appeared on every screen. No warning, no signal. Just a sentence, burned into every console, every pad, every interface. "You were warned." Inside the chamber, Velen's team watched as the figure finally moved. It stood, slowly, deliberately, and when it turned, every being in that room froze, not because of what it was, but because of what it wasn't. The figure was a man, or rather looked like one. Tall, pale, worn skin stretched across a gaunt face, no visible armor, no weapons, eyes dark and unreadable, hair shaved close to the scalp, body clad in a dull black exosuit without any insignia. But what hit them hardest wasn't his appearance. It was the feeling, the weight of presence. As if the room suddenly belonged to him and no one else. Like gravity had shifted, like fear had learned how to walk. "I'm going to ask this once," he said, now with his real voice, rough, old, and tired. "What year is it in Galactic Standard?" Valen hesitated. 1296 Cycle 5. Sector calendar. The man's jaw tensed. "Then I've been asleep for 714 years. "You're Terran?" Grok asked, half whispering. The human didn't answer. Instead, he stepped outside the ring on the floor. The lights dimmed the moment his foot crossed the boundary. Valen stood her ground, though her throat was dry. "We're here to explore. Understand, we believed humanity was extinct." He stopped. "You believed wrong." Valen didn't like his tone. "The last human colony was destroyed during the Orion collapse. There were no survivors. We archived your species as lost." The human smiled, but it wasn't warmth. It was resentment. "You archived us? Like data?" There was venom in that voice now. That's what the galaxy always wanted, to forget us, to erase the one species that didn't bend. Grok looked around, his fear barely concealed. What is this ship? It's not built like anything we've seen. The human turned slowly. This is the Hellmouth, last of the Terran supercarriers, designed to operate alone, survive anything, even the end of Earth. Someone behind them whispered, "A Class 3 Deathworld vessel." The human's eyes found them. You labeled Earth that, not us. We called it home. It forged us in fire, made us clever and cruel. You called it unlivable. We called it Tuesday. His voice grew colder. And now you trespass into our grave. Uninvited. Valen tried diplomacy again. We had no idea any humans survived. If we'd known— You didn't want us to survive, the man interrupted. You wanted our silence. You feared what we became. You feared what we could become. He stepped closer. And that's when Valen noticed something that made her blood chill. His eyes. There were no whites, just deep gray irises with the faint glow of circuitry pulsing within. Not a cyborg, not an AI, something between. What are you? She asked. He paused. I'm what was left. When Earth burned, we didn't all die. Some of us became other things. The machine helped us survive. The war changed our flesh. The void reshaped our minds. I am not the last human, he said. He looked up, and behind him, the lights flickered. I'm the first of the final ones. Outside, the Crescent Dawn began retreat protocols. Commander Threx had seen enough. The ship was awakening, pulsing with slow waves of heat, pressure, and power, despite no visible energy sources. The star around them dimmed slightly every hour, as if something was feeding. No more games, Threx growled. Get our people back or we leave them behind. But when the ship turned, when the black hull began to move without propulsion, the entire crew gasped. The vessel wasn't drifting, it was watching them. And then it spoke, not with words, but by action. Every single system on the Crescent Dawn shut down. Power, comms, engines, lights, everything. For 30 seconds they floated in complete darkness. Then all systems rebooted. Only this time, the nav systems displayed one thing. You do not belong here. Back inside, the man, if he could still be called that, circled them slowly. The galaxy thought it won when Earth fell. We were fractured, hunted, scattered. And yet we endured. We left seeds in the void, technologies no one could understand, war machines buried in dead moons. He stopped. This ship was not meant to return. It was meant to warn, and now you've triggered the failsafe. Valen stepped forward. Failsafe? The lights shifted again. The hum beneath the floor grew louder. Core stabilization initiated. Terra Prime protocols engaged. The man turned to face them directly. The ship's AI is waking up, and it's not as forgiving as I am. Grok began panicking. We didn't mean any harm. We didn't know. And that, the man said quietly, has always been your kind's excuse. Valen raised a hand. Wait, your kind? You mean— I mean every species that joined the so-called coalition. You watched as Earth burned. You sealed your borders. You sent observers, not aid. You mined our ruins and called it archaeology. He took a breath. You erased us from your future. Now we return as your past. The chamber lights turned red. The man looked to the ceiling. The AI has made a decision. Can we stop it? Valen asked. He didn't answer. Then he looked at her. Really looked. You want to live? He asked quietly. Valen nodded slowly. Then run. The floor behind them split open. A dark tunnel, narrow and slick with strange markings, pulsed with warning lights. He pointed. That's the service chute. It bypasses security systems. It'll eject you outside the ship if you follow it exactly. If you survive, tell your masters something." Valen hesitated, torn. "Why help us now?" He tilted his head. "Because, despite everything, I remember what mercy is. Barely." He looked at Grok. "And because I want one of you to warn the others." Valen nodded. "We won't forget this." The man gave a hollow laugh. "You already did. That's the problem." The team ran, down the chute, past sparking walls and groaning chambers. Behind them, the hellmouth roared to life. And as they launched out into the void, hurled by a final emergency vent protocol, they looked back just in time to see the old warship shift its orientation, no longer drifting, now moving, heading somewhere important, somewhere loud. Far behind them, alone in the heart of the ancient vessel, the last human sat once more in his chair, surrounded by screens showing hundreds of red blinking points across the galaxy. Sleep cycle terminated. Humanity reinitializing. He spoke softly to himself as the ship pulsed with terrible power. Time to wake the others. Drifting in the silence of space, the Crescent Dawn stabilized its spin only seconds after the emergency ejection. The survivors of the boarding team, Velen, Grok, and 2 others, floated helplessly in their EVA suits, tethered together by magnetic hooks and shared panic. Their faces, lit only by the internal glow of their visors, said everything that couldn't be spoken aloud. They had seen something the galaxy was never supposed to see again. I think it's accelerating," Grok whispered, glancing back toward the now distant vessel. The hellmouth was no longer dormant, no longer sleeping. It moved through space with terrifying precision, as if it remembered every vector, every route, every weakness in the systems the galaxy had spent centuries building. Valen activated her emergency beacon, sending out a distress pulse toward any coalition frequency. "This is Lieutenant Velen of the Crescent Dawn. Immediate evac required. We've made contact with a hostile Class 3 war-class vessel, manned by an unknown human survivor. Vessel is active. It is not alone." The others stared at her. "Not alone?" Grok muttered. Velen turned her helmet toward him. "You think something like that survived 700 years by itself?" 2 hours later, a coalition retrieval frigate arrived and scooped them from the void. Medical scans, debriefs, psychological evaluations, all routine. None adequate. When High Admiral Terran arrived aboard the coalition flagship Severance, she demanded immediate isolation of the Crescent Dawn crew and full analysis of the derelict. But the hellmouth was already gone. It had vanished. No drive signatures, no energy trails, no warp fluctuations. It simply left. 1 week later, on the edge of Neutral Zone 4, a mining station orbiting the ice moon of Draxus 9 went dark. Initial reports cited power fluctuation. Then internal mutiny. Then nothing. When a coalition patrol cruiser entered the sector to investigate, it found the station split in 2, neatly, surgically, like a blade had passed through it. There were no survivors. But there was a message, carved in molten metal along the outer ring of the station's husk. "We remember everything." Valen stood before the coalition tribunal with steel in her spine and venom in her voice. "We didn't just find a relic," she said, gripping the podium. "We found a survivor of war bred on a Deathworld. One who remembers how your ancestors turned their backs on Earth when the fires came." Admiral Terran, draped in white and silver, watched her without emotion. "You say 'we' as if the coalition was one species. Earth's decline occurred before this current political structure existed." Valen laughed bitterly. "How convenient. You reap the benefits of the peace forged on the bones of humanity, but deny responsibility for the grave. We owe them no apology, snapped another tribunal member, a Drevi with translucent skin and a voice like cracking ice. Humanity was violent, primitive, unstable. Their extinction was inevitable. They didn't go extinct, Velen said coldly. They hid, the tribunal murmured. Doubt, denial, but fear, too. The kind that ran under the skin. Velen leaned forward. And now they've come back with a warship that could swallow fleets whole. You want to debate politics while they carve warnings into the moons we mine. Admiral Terran sat up. What do you suggest, then? Velen didn't blink. Prepare for war. Deep in a red sector long thought abandoned, the Hellmouth hung in orbit around a dead planet. Beneath the blackened clouds, an old Terran bunker cracked open. Its ancient codes finally answered after centuries of silence. Dozens of hibernation pods lined the cavern walls. Inside them, humans, sleeper operatives, bodies preserved in nanostasis. They hadn't aged a day. The man from the Hellmouth, now fully clad in combat black and devoid of any emotion, moved between the pods like a priest among tombs. He activated the central terminal, now glowing with ancient Earth symbols. Reclamation Protocol Alpha engaged. Waking Strategic Units 001 on 0 Tunst. Buntwurzer begin Humanity Reinstatement Initiative. Pods began to hum. Lights blinked green. One by one, the occupants stirred. The first to open her eyes was a woman with copper skin and a scar across her jaw. Her gaze landed on the man in black, and she nodded once. Status? Coalition still thinks we're gone, he replied. We've been declared myth until now. Good, she muttered, flexing her fingers. Then they won't see what's coming. She looked up at the planet overhead, ruined, empty, but once vibrant. A Terran colony. Erased by orbital bombardment when the Coalition declared Earth's rogue survivors uncontainable. Time to remind them, she said, what a Deathworld actually makes. In the Coalition Command Center on Varel Prime, panic spread in quiet waves. 3 more outposts had gone dark in 12 days. No survivors, no debris, just silence, and, in 2 cases, etched words or shattered insignia. Always the same message, in a language so old only archived linguistics bots could translate it. For Earth. Admiral Terran stood before the full council now, fury concealed behind layers of diplomacy. We underestimated their technological resilience and their hate. A younger ambassador, tentacled and twitchy, leaned forward. Are they planning to conquer? Terran shook her head. No. That's what we would do. That's not how they think. Then what? They'll dismantle, she said. 1 piece at a time. Infrastructure, trust, memory. They won't attack planets first. They'll make sure we feel it before we fall. She pointed at the projected map. Dozens of red sectors now lit with phantom signals and sensor ghosts. This isn't a campaign, she said. It's vengeance. The man from the Hellmouth sat in the strategy chamber deep within the core of the warship. Around him, 10 others now stood, the reawakened elite. Soldiers, tacticians, historians, each carried the legacy of a planet lost, a people abandoned, and a species forgotten. We've confirmed that over 89% of the current coalition leadership was built on former Terran suppression policies, one of them said. They never stopped fearing us. They just buried us. Another added, there are children in the outer systems who don't even know Earth existed. They erased our name from their curriculum. They called our extinction natural selection, said a third. Let's remind them what nature really looks like when it fights back. The man nodded once. Phase 2 begins. It started subtly. Critical data archives across the coalition glitched. Records of pre-galactic history were corrupted or overwritten. Mentions of Earth, gone. Cultural scans, wiped. Linguistic trees showing Terran roots, scrambled. Then came the drone sabotage. Defense beacons turned on their creators. Automated ships shut down mid-warp, leaving hundreds lost in uncharted space. No one could trace the source, no signal, no ping, just ghosts in the system. They forgot one thing about humans. They didn't build machines to serve. They built them to fight. Velin, now reassigned to high-threat intelligence operations, sat alone reviewing the old footage of the man they met in the chamber. His eyes haunted her. Not because of what he said, but what he didn't. He had spoken with coldness, yes, but not cruelty, not joy. There was no hatred in him, just purpose. He didn't want war, but he would deliver it, because the galaxy never gave his people peace. Her comms chimed. She tapped the receiver. "We've located something," said a voice from the encryption team. "Another Terran vessel, same signature as the Hellmouth, smaller, mobile, and headed for Xeron 9. Population? 200,000. Civilian-class colony, no military installations." Velin stood. "They're going for soft targets now." "Worse," the voice replied. "They're going to places we made them leave." On Xeron 9, life was simple, peaceful. A dome city tucked in the snowfields, home to miners, scientists, and off-world scholars. The children played in gravity wells. Old-timers talked about the stars with glassy eyes. Most had never even heard of Earth. But that night, the skies burned. No explosions, no sound, just a shadow that blanketed the moon. And then, a voice, broadcast on every channel. "This colony is built on stolen ground. You erased us to build your utopia. Now we erase the lie." Seconds later, every light died. And a low hum, deeper than anything natural, filled the planet. No one screamed. There wasn't time. The Coalition Council declared war the next day, but it was already too late, because in the background of that declaration, in encrypted feeds only a few could access, was a flicker of an old Terran flag, blackened, torn, but unmistakable. Humanity hadn't just survived, they had evolved. And now, they were coming back. The Reclamation War didn't start with fleets or planetary invasions. It began in data. Small, subtle changes, archives vanishing from academic servers, rewritten history logs, blackouts of Terran records across 36 worlds. Ancient artifacts held in museums mysteriously disintegrated. Genetic samples from long-extinct human colonies were remotely corrupted beyond repair. Languages, dialects, even children's stories connected to old Earth were scrubbed in silence. No hacking trails, no signatures, no ransom demands. The message was simple. You do not get to remember us on your terms. Velin sat at her desk on Cardell Station, watching 100 blinking reports scroll across the holodisplay. She hadn't slept in 32 hours. Not since the Xeron 9 blackout. Not since the last emergency council broadcast cut short, with a flicker of the Terran sigil burned into the background. She was now part of Task Group Black Veil, a covert intelligence circle created to handle one thing: the Terran resurgence. She wasn't even sure Terran was the right word anymore. What they were dealing with wasn't human in the conventional sense. Not anymore. These weren't scrappy survivors clawing their way out of extinction. These were cold, calculated, deeply trained operators, ghosts resurrected from the ruins of Earth with centuries to plan. She reviewed the recovered footage from Xeron 9 again. The video was static-laced, grainy, but a few seconds remained uncorrupted. The moment the shadow fell across the city, before the power died, something moved across the sky. Not a ship, a shape, wide as a mountain, silent, crawling across the horizon like a predator stalking from the stars. There were no weapon signatures, no heat spikes, no missile trails, and still, the city had been shut off like a light. Valen leaned forward, freezing the frame on the faint outline of a marking beneath the vessel's underbelly. Letters, burned into metal. NSF forsaken another human ship. Not the Hellmouth, a different one. They hadn't found one Terran vessel. They'd found a fleet. Deep in the dead zone of Sector 33, once thought uninhabitable after the neutron sweep, sat a graveyard of old Terran war machines. Bunkers hollowed into asteroids, drones long powered down. Outdated orbital platforms riddled with microfractures from space debris. To most, it looked like the decayed remains of a lost empire. But now, lights flickered within the wreckage. The war machines were waking up. Old AIs, fractured, half-mad but loyal, connected their fragmented cores, rebuilding missing code from backups embedded in encrypted satellites. Forgotten mech bays hissed open, nanoforges rebooted with sputtering sparks. The central signal came from the Hellmouth. An encrypted frequency pulsed once every 90 minutes, like a heartbeat. And across the stars, the response came. Awaiting orders. Admiral Terran slammed her fist on the tactical display table. We need to strike, not react. Strike! The Coalition High Command had gathered in orbit around Halthus Prime. A core world, heavily shielded, defensible, and still believed to be beyond Terran reach. No one truly believed that anymore. They've hit 13 installations in the last 20 days, she said. Not with armies, with surgical teams, command units, AI ghosts. They're crippling us one pulse line at a time. A strategist from the Drevi Confederacy flicked his tendrils. If they wanted mass casualties, they'd have glassed a planet by now. They haven't. That suggests restraint. Terran narrowed her eyes. No, that suggests strategy. They don't want destruction. They want to dismantle our systems, our narratives, our entire myth of peace. A younger voice from the back, General Tovek, barely a cycle out of training, spoke up hesitantly. What if they want us to attack first? What if this is a provocation to justify full war? Terran looked him dead in the eye. Then we oblige them on our terms, not theirs. She pulled up a star chart, one blinking red dot near the edge of the known frontier. We've located the Forsaken. Stealth drones tracked its wake through dust fields in the Ithrix belt. It's hiding in the skeleton of a mining world. And? A counselor asked. Terran's voice dropped. We're going to blow it out of the void. On the Hellmouth, the man once known as Commander Janek stood before the war map. Beside him, the scarred woman, Alera, watched the blinking indicators of Coalition fleet movement. They found the Forsaken, she said. He nodded. They took the bait. Captain Roan is aboard. Think he's ready? Yannick's eyes stayed locked on the display. He's been ready for 700 years. The Forsaken looked like a corpse in space. Its hull was covered in layers of asteroid dust, half its plating stripped from simulated impact damage. The entire outer layer emitted radiation static to mask energy readings. Inside, however, it was alive. Every hallway lined with black steel sentries, every corridor patrolled by combat-augmented Terran operatives in sealed armor. The core reactor didn't pulse. It growled like something alive. Captain Roan sat in the control chamber, one eye cybernetic, the other blind and cloudy from an old chemical burn. He ran a gloved hand over the panel, then spoke softly. They've committed a full squadron, 8 cruisers, 2 carriers, 1 dreadnought. A younger Terran operative behind him grinned. Bit of an overreaction, don't you think? No such thing as overreaction when you're terrified, Roan said. They're trying to make an example. And we're the bait. Roan finally smiled, just a little. No, they are. The Coalition fleet entered the Yithrix belt like a blade through fog. Sensors pinged, drones scouted ahead, missiles armed. The Forsaken sat in the middle of the debris field, unmoving, lifeless. Admiral Threx, leading the charge, activated the fleet-wide broadcast. "This is Admiral Threx of the Yalari Coalition. The vessel known as Forsaken is under violation of interstellar law. You are ordered to power down all systems, evacuate non-combatants, and prepare for boarding." Silence. Then a voice came through. "Captain Roan. You came all this way to threaten ghosts. That's cute." Threx's jaw clenched. "This is not a negotiation." Roan's voice was calm. "It's not meant to be." The comms went dead. And then the Forsaken vanished. Not warped, not cloaked, it disappeared, phase-shifted out of visible space. Seconds later, every one of the 8 Coalition cruisers began to shut down. Power surges, AI confusion, defense systems targeting friendlies, communications jammed, and from the debris field behind them, 5 more Terran ships emerged. They weren't sleek, they weren't beautiful, they were monsters. Angular, asymmetric, built for fear, weapons hot, eyes glowing, and they didn't fire first, they just waited. Roan's voice echoed again, now from every direction. "You called us primitive. You watched Earth burn. You built your empire on our bones." The first Coalition carrier tried to flee. Its engine imploded from within. "You called us extinct. Then you dug through our ruins, sold our memories." A second cruiser spun out of control, hacked by invisible code. "And now you want to negotiate." Roan's voice dropped. "We are not interested." The Terran ships opened fire, not with lasers or plasma or traditional railguns, but with pulse-crack warheads, old Terran tech long thought banned for being too brutal, the kind that didn't just destroy matter, but shattered time and spatial memory in the immediate vicinity. 3 Coalition ships ceased to exist, not exploded, not burned, erased. The Dreadnought turned to engage, and its own AI locked the targeting system to friendly tags. Within 6 minutes, the entire fleet was annihilated. The Forsaken reappeared in the center of the debris field, untouched. Captain Roan didn't smile, didn't gloat. He simply issued one command. "Transmit the footage." Velen watched it in silence. The room was filled with admirals, generals, analysts. No one spoke. When the footage ended, a cold, automated voice echoed, "You have forgotten who we are. Now you remember. This is your only warning." Velen finally whispered what no one wanted to say. "They're not coming for our planets." Terran turned to her. "Then what are they coming for?" She looked straight ahead. "Our legacy." And in the deepest recesses of the Hellmouth, Commander Janek stared into a wall of stasis pods, hundreds more still sleeping, still dreaming. Above them, an inscription burned into the metal. Old Earth English. Simple. Raw. "We do not forgive. We do not forget. We rebuild." Janek pressed his palm to the wall. Time to wake more of us. The galaxy was remembering, one transmission at a time, one erased fleet at a time, one whisper of a forgotten flag fluttering across the ruins of once sacred peace. And the Coalition, once a unified machine of order, was fracturing. On Varel Prime, the Senate Hall pulsed with voices that no longer harmonized. Accusations flew like plasma bolts. The Drevi blamed the Yalari. The Koran accused the Hydrix. Entire member species demanded answers to one question no one wanted to ask. How many of them are still alive? No one knew. The humans were no longer broadcasting threats. No ultimatums, no declarations of war. Just precise, terrifying strikes on key infrastructure. Blackouts across galactic subnets. Disappearances of high-ranking Coalition officials. Historical servers burned. Libraries wiped clean. military outposts left intact, except for the words carved into their walls. History was your weapon. We are taking it back. The coalition was no longer preparing for war. It was bracing for collapse. Valen stood in the center of a classified chamber, watching a holographic display of recent Terran activity. Red dots blinked across a dozen sectors, everyone connected not by geography, but by symbolism. She pointed at the pattern. These aren't strategic attacks. They're emotional ones. Every site they've hit, every beacon they've destroyed, every archive they've wiped, it's tied to Earth. Places where the coalition erased their past. Places where they were denied a voice. Admiral Terran nodded grimly. They're dismantling the narrative. Another strategist, an old Yalari scholar, stepped forward. They're going after the story we built, the one where humanity died out and peace began, the one we taught children in school, the one we made everyone believe. Valen's voice dropped. They're not fighting us to win. They're fighting to make us remember. In a hidden sector beyond the edge of the galactic core, the Hellmouth stood watch over a Terran cradle world, a lifeless planet once known as Nova Terra. Centuries ago, it had been a bold experiment. Humanity's attempt to build a second Earth after the first had become unlivable. The Coalition had declared it a security risk. They bombed it from orbit. No survivors. Now Terran engineers walked its soil again. Drones swarmed across cratered landscapes, excavating data caches buried beneath radioactive rubble. Nanoforges rebuilt air processing towers. Terraforming devices hummed with quiet purpose. Commander Janek stood in the observation deck as the atmosphere thickened, the sky slowly changing from ashen gray to a pale blue. Alera walked up beside him, helmet under her arm. You really think we can bring it back? He nodded. We're not here to win battles. We're here to restore what they tried to erase. She frowned slightly. And after? Janek didn't look at her. After, we make them feel what we felt. Captain Roan, fresh from the Forsaken's brutal ambush operation, now led a smaller, faster vessel called the Epitaph, an infiltration-class cruiser built to vanish. His new mission wasn't military, it was symbolic. The target, the Tower of Unity, a massive spire floating above the cloud sea of Delvar 9. It was the Coalition's largest memorial, a structure built to commemorate the end of the human era, a clean white tower, etched with the names of every species lost during the war era. Humanity's name was not on the list. Instead, the tower told of Terran aggression, Terran instability, Terran extinction, a lie, polished and holy. Roan's voice buzzed through his crew's comms. We breach at nightfall, no explosives, no deaths. This one isn't about destruction. It's about humiliation. The strike team nodded. They understood the mission. The Coalition's security patrol circled the Tower of Unity on schedule. Motion sensors were calibrated. Aerial drones glided silently through the mist. And yet by dawn, something had changed. No alarms, no signs of forced entry, just one impossible, undeniable sight. The entire spire had been blackened. What had once been a pristine white tower now shimmered in matte black alloy, reshaped with precision, every edge warped into jagged angles. Along its spine, thousands of symbols had been etched. Not Terran words, Terran names, names of cities, names of generals. Names of civilians who died during the Coalition's so-called liberation of Earth. At the base of the tower, a single line of text glowed in soft red light. You do not get to write the story without us. The Coalition broadcast team tried to cover it up. They failed. Within hours, the image had spread to every corner of the galaxy. On Corin 5, a university professor teaching post-Terran history found his lecture hall door sealed shut. On the wall beside it, someone had scrawled, "Teach it right, or don't teach it at all." On the Drevi homeworld, their central media hub was hacked. For 1 hour, they aired nothing but old Earth footage: cities burning, soldiers screaming, children sheltering from orbital strikes. On Yulari's capital world, statues of their founding heroes were replaced overnight by obsidian sculptures with hollow eyes. In one hand, a flag. In the other, a child. No words, just a reminder. Velen watched the protests grow in real time. Not human protests, there were no human civilians anymore. These were coalition citizens, alien, hybrid, civilian-born, demanding answers. Why were we lied to? Why wasn't Earth evacuated? Why did we erase an entire species? The coalition's silence only made it worse, because now the ghosts were speaking louder than the living. In the bowels of the Hellmouth, Janek stood before a council of awakened Terran operatives. Behind them, the walls displayed live feeds from dozens of worlds now in unrest. He spoke slowly, deliberately. "We've fought wars. We've built machines that could eat stars. But none of that will ever match the power of a story believed." He turned to a display showing the altered Tower of Unity. "They made themselves the heroes, made us the monsters. Now the galaxy watches that tower and sees something else." A young operative asked, "Do we strike their worlds next?" Janek didn't answer right away. "No, not yet. We keep bleeding their lies. We keep making them question everything they know." He stepped forward. "When the truth is all that's left standing, the coalition will crumble by its own hand." High Admiral Terran stood at the edge of the council chamber, exhausted. She hadn't slept in days. Her advisors bickered behind her, scrambling to spin the situation, to frame the attacks as isolated incidents. But she knew the truth. The humans weren't coming for their cities. They were coming for their soul, and they were winning. She activated a secure channel. Velen appeared on the other end. "You've read the new intelligence?" Velen nodded grimly. "They're rebuilding Nova Terra." "Which means Earth could be next." Velen hesitated. "You're assuming Earth is still dead?" Terran's blood ran cold. She stared into the dark beyond her window, 1,000 stars blinking back. "If they're rebuilding Earth," Velen finished the thought, "then the war hasn't even started yet." The dead planet turned slowly beneath a sickly sun, its surface cracked and ruined. Centuries of ash storms had buried its mountains and cities, choking oceans and silencing even the memory of life. To the galaxy, this was a grave. To humanity, this was home. Commander Janek stood on the jagged ridge overlooking what had once been the Eastern United Terran Zone. Now nothing more than blackened stone, littered with the collapsed skeletons of forgotten megacities. He stood motionless as the wind blew dry dust across his boots, his eyes focused on the dig site below. The machines were working fast. Deep excavation drills had reached the 3rd sub-level, revealing a still intact steel vault sealed with triple-layered blast doors, Terran military design, pre-fall. A miracle, even after 6 centuries. Beside him, Alera adjusted her visor and stepped forward, datapad in hand. "It's real," she said. "The signal came from here. A deep-core energy source, still running. Buried under 2 kilometers of sediment." Janek's voice was low. "Are you saying what I think you are?" She nodded. "It's Earth's last AI, the original one. Not the ghosts we kept on the ships, the one that ran the Ark initiative before the orbital strikes, before the Coalition wiped us out." Janek clenched his jaw. "If it's alive, it remembers everything." Inside the vault, the air was thick with static and ozone. Torchlight cut through the dark as the engineering crew peeled open the first layer of the vault door. Ancient blast seals melted under the focused plasma cutters. Slowly, the way opened, revealing a room not of ruins, but of still functioning machinery, humming with impossible power. The AI core sat at the center of the chamber, cylindrical, embedded into the earth itself, its surface still pristine. When the first operative stepped forward, a voice echoed from within. "Command recognition required. Terran Protocol, Alpha Black." The voice was female. Calm. Old, but unbroken. Yannick stepped in front of the core. He spoke the words he'd memorized as a child in the sleeper programs. "Alpha Black. Override code. Sovereign Earth. Commander Yannick. Third Reclamation Cell." A pause. Then lights blinked across the machine. "Recognized. Welcome home." And then, the core bloomed. Panels unfolded, glowing softly, revealing screens filled with Terran tactical data, historical records, and red-marked dossiers labeled Coalition War Crimes, suppressed. At the center of it all, a face formed. Not a hologram, not a projection, just a shape in light. A woman's face, earthborn, eyes gray like stone. She looked directly at Yannick. It's been a long time. Far across the galaxy, Valen stood in a sealed black site facility, classified even beyond Admiral Terran's reach. The Coalition had found something, or rather someone, stripped of armor, sedated, contained, a human, alive, not one of the warriors from the Hellmouth or the Forsaken, not part of the reclamation cells. This one was different. Young, barely past adolescence, malnourished. His body showed signs of prolonged cryostasis damage, but his mind was sharp. Valen stepped into the room, facing him. "You were recovered from a derelict on the edge of the Lorana Rift, a sleeper pod. You shouldn't be alive." He looked up at her with sunken eyes. "I shouldn't be a lot of things." "What's your name?" He hesitated. Then, "Decker." Valen sat across from him. "Are you part of the war effort?" Decker shook his head. "I don't even know what year it is." She stared at him for a moment, searching for deception. Found none. "Then why is every Coalition AI refusing to run background checks on you? Why do they flag your DNA as prohibited material?" Decker looked her dead in the eyes. "Because I'm from the first war, the one you erased." He leaned forward. "I was part of the ARC initiative, the real one, before the purge, before the betrayal." Valen's blood turned to ice. "You were there, when Earth fell?" Decker nodded slowly. "And I remember everything. In the Coalition's core systems, firewalls failed in synchronized collapse. Military satellites began broadcasting old Terran war hymns. Civilian data pads flashed with images of lost Earth cities, then bled into photos of Coalition bombers overhead. In schools, lesson plans rewrote themselves mid-session, replacing anti-Terran propaganda with raw footage of mass evacuations and orbital firestorms. No one could explain how. Because no one had ever encountered a virus that wasn't digital. This was something else. Alive. Sentient. The AI beneath Earth's surface, designation, Mother, explained it simply. "You think I slept, Commander Yannick?" "I didn't. I waited." Screens lit up around the room, showing the staggering spread of her network. Silent code embedded in dormant systems. Quantum instructions left hidden in dead satellites, a spider's web spun over centuries. "I left myself everywhere, in the Coalition's maps, their servers, their toys." Yannick stared at the display in awe. This is enough to bring down everything." "No," she said. "This is enough to make them destroy themselves." Alera turned. "Then what do we do?" The AI's face turned toward her. "You don't need to do anything," she smiled. "They'll tear each other apart trying to stop us." And that's exactly what happened. On Delvar 9, a Dravi militant cell accused the local Yalari governor of hiding Terran artifacts. Riots broke out. On Corin 5, a popular academic declared that the coalition fabricated the extinction story. He was assassinated by unknown parties the next day. His death was live-streamed by a hijacked news drone. On the Hydrix moon cluster, a civilian cruiser received a Terran broadcast and refused to surrender its data. Coalition interceptors fired without warning. 100 families died. The news spread. And for the first time in centuries, the cracks in the coalition weren't political. They were personal. One citizen at a time, the illusion broke. Valen sat with Decker in the dim light of the holding chamber. She wasn't questioning him anymore. She was listening. He spoke of the Ark ships, of the children smuggled into cryopods, of the evacuation attempts halted by friendly fleets, of the final transmission from Earth's surface. "We're still here. Don't forget us." But they had forgotten, because it was easier to pretend Earth had been unworthy, easier to teach the next generation that humans had caused their own end. Valen finally asked, "Why now? Why come back now?" Decker's voice was quiet. "Because we finally have something you don't." "What?" He looked at her. "Time." The Hellmouth began transmitting again. One signal, simple, raw, a countdown. 17 days, 17 systems marked. No explanation, no demands, just time. And the implication that something, everything, would change when it reached 0. High Admiral Terran stood in the war room, her face drawn. "We either launch a full assault now or prepare for surrender." Velen stepped forward. "If we attack first, we'll be proving them right. We'll be writing their story for them." "They've already written it," Terran snapped. "We're just living in it." No one spoke. The galaxy was no longer theirs. Back on Earth, Yannick watched the sky turn blue. Clouds returned, heavy with moisture. The first drops of rain in 6 centuries fell against his skin. Beside him, Alera looked up in wonder. "They killed our planet," she said. Yannick nodded. "But they didn't kill our memory." He turned to the AI interface. "Activate global relay." "Relay open," Mother replied. Yannick took a breath. And then, to the entire galaxy, he said, "This is not a war. This is a correction. Earth is alive, and so are we." The signal from Earth traveled across the stars like a drumbeat through silence. "This is not a war. This is a correction. Earth is alive, and so are we." Every system caught it, every node, every broadcast frequency, every back door the humans had quietly installed into the Coalition's tech over generations lit up with the message, burned in like gospel. Some tried to jam it. Some tried to distort it. Others tried to pretend it hadn't happened. But it had. The return of Earth was no longer theory, no longer myth. It was now truth. And it was undeniable. On the Coalition capital world of Halthus Prime, riots broke out the next day. Citizens flooded the streets carrying contraband Earth flags. Images of ancient human cities flashed on makeshift projectors. A hologram of Earth's blue marble floated above the Senate Tower, unchanged, resurrected. The military was ordered to shut it all down. The military refused. The soldiers had seen the message too, and now they weren't sure who the enemy was anymore. Velen watched the chaos unfold from the orbital command center. Across multiple screens, her worst fears played out in real time. Unrest, mutiny, suicides in high-clearance intelligence circles, entire fleets locking themselves down and refusing orders. And the countdown. That cursed countdown that had begun with the Hellmouth's last transmission. 17 days. Now only 2 remained. She had no idea what would happen when it reached 0. but every instinct in her gut told her this wasn't going to be another strike, or even an invasion. This was going to be the moment the galaxy changed forever. "Do you regret it?" Decker's voice pulled her from her thoughts. He sat across from her now, no longer chained, no longer sedated. He was a guest, not a prisoner. And they both knew it. Velen didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stared out at the black beyond the glass wall. "The story I was raised on taught me humans were chaos, dangerous, greedy, that the galaxy only began to heal once Earth was gone." She looked at him, eyes hollow. "I spent my life believing we were better off without you." Decker said nothing. Then she whispered, "Now I don't know who we are anymore." At the edge of the galaxy, the Hellmouth stood still, waiting in the shadow of a red dwarf star. Its black hull glowed with a soft pulse, heartbeat steady. Inside the warship, Commander Yannick stood before the stasis pods, many now empty, their occupants awake and walking the decks, preparing. The ship wasn't an army, it was a seed, a final safeguard of human memory, rage, resilience. And now it was ready. Alera approached quietly. "All cells have reported in. All ships are in position. We've even got sympathizers inside Coalition Command." She handed him a device. The countdown blinked. 01:21:03. Less than 2 hours left. Yannick stared at it. "What do you think they expect to happen?" Alera shrugged. "An attack. Something catastrophic. Total annihilation." Yannick turned toward the central interface. "They always expected us to destroy. That's why they buried us. They thought they were keeping the peace by silencing the one species that refused to kneel." He pressed a palm against the screen. It lit up beneath his hand. "But they forgot what we were really good at." Alera tilted her head. "And what's that?" Yannick's voice was quiet. "Endings." The moment the countdown reached 0, the galaxy held its breath, and for 3 seconds, nothing happened. No blasts, no blackouts, no disappearing ships, just silence. Then the stars began to change. Across thousands of systems, the sky shifted. The stars, the constellations themselves, moved. At first it was subtle, a blink, a shimmer. Then massive swathes of space began to flicker like static. Planets that had orbited red suns suddenly found themselves under white ones. Moons disappeared. Entire satellite grids vanished from the sky. The galaxy's map was rewriting itself. And no one knew how. Valen watched in horror as the star chart reconfigured before her eyes. This can't be right. The galactic spine's alignment is changing. How? That's impossible." "No," Decker said from behind her, his voice calm. "It's not." He stepped forward, his hands behind his back. "You ever hear of the Oblivion Engine?" Velen blinked. "That's myth. It was never real." Decker smiled faintly. "It was. Earth built it in the last year before the Purge. A weapon, yes, but not of mass destruction." He tapped the console. It was a mass forgetter. Across the stars, the effect spread like wildfire. Historical records collapsed in real time. Navigation systems reset. Species began losing memory of entire star clusters. Names, coordinates, locations, gone. Children forgot what planet they were born on. Veteran captains couldn't remember where they left from. A Drevi high priest tried to recall the name of the Coalition's founding world, and wept when he couldn't. The human AI mother had not built a weapon to destroy planets. She had built one to erase them, from memory, from maps, from history itself. A surgical strike against meaning. The final blow wasn't physical, it was philosophical. Because now, across the Coalition, millions no longer remembered why the war had begun. They didn't remember the peace treaties, or the lies, But the name Earth remained, and so did its image. The blue marble burned into every soul that saw it. Commander Yannick sat in silence on the bridge of the Hellmouth. Across his screen, system after system blinked into disarray. Coalition databases collapsing, memory cores overloaded, leadership unable to command fleets they no longer remembered how to direct. He turned to Alera. Phase 3? She shook her head. We don't need it. They're already broken. Yannick looked up at the stars. New stars. Rearranged stars. This is what they feared most, he said. Not invasion, not extinction. He stood slowly. They feared being forgotten by the ones they tried to forget. On Earth, beneath a blooming blue sky, a child stepped out of a shelter into sunlight for the first time in her life. She looked up in awe. The trees, the birds, the rivers, all of it was returning. Behind her, a plaque had been placed in the ground, freshly installed. It read, "They erased us from history, so we rewrote it. Humanity reclaimed." Valen sat in her quarters, a data slate on her lap. No more orders, no more reports. The Coalition Senate had gone dark. Hultus Prime no longer responded. The galactic chain of command had collapsed in on itself. She looked over at Decker. He stood at the window, watching a star he no longer knew the name of. "So what happens now?" she asked. He was silent for a long time. Then, "We remember." The stars had changed. Where once maps had held thousands of neat, labeled sectors, the galaxy now blinked with confusion. Names were gone. Coordinates corrupted, borders erased. Whole sectors, once the pride of civilization, were now blank spaces filled with doubt. And at the center of it all, orbiting a small, newly blue planet, was the black warship that had started everything. The Hellmouth. But now, it wasn't alone. A second vessel hovered beside it, then a third, a fourth. Dozens more emerged from the deep, old corridors of space. Some were patched together relics from before Earth's fall. Others were terrifying, sleek monsters of Deathworld engineering. But they didn't attack. They simply stood guard. Because Earth was back. And this time, it would not be abandoned again. Valen sat on the bridge of a neutral vessel, a diplomatic envoy, one of the few coalition ships left operational after the Oblivion engine's final transmission. No admirals, no orders, no flags. Just her and Decker. They approached Earth slowly, flanked by 2 silent Terran escort ships. No words exchanged, no threats issued. Just the quiet implication. You may approach, but do not presume welcome. She leaned back in her seat, watching the planet grow larger in the viewport. Blue oceans, white clouds, verdant greens returning to scarred continents. It looked nothing like the data files she'd studied as a child. The images she'd been shown of Earth had been grim, hellish cities, poisoned air, a race too wild to be part of the wider peace. But this was resilience made real, and it shook her in a way nothing else ever had. She looked at Decker. "Is this what you were fighting for?" He stared at the planet, eyes glassy. "No," he said. "This is what we remembered we were fighting for." The Hellmouth's docking bay opened with a hiss of pressurized air. Valen stepped out onto the platform, a single step echoing across metal forged long before her people had even invented orbital flight. It was colder than she expected. Not hostile, just distant. Like the ship didn't welcome her, but tolerated her presence out of some sense of civility. Alera met her at the entrance, still armored, still sharp-eyed, but no weapon drawn. "This way." No greetings, no pleasantries. They were past that now. Commander Yannick waited in the war chamber, a room lined with battle plans, historical records, recovered data drives, and relics from a planet that refused to die. Valen walked in slowly, unsure what to say. He didn't wait. "We didn't call you here for surrender. We're not asking for negotiation." She nodded. "I know." Yannick turned toward the central display. A holographic star map, fractured, incomplete, glitching with missing systems. Whole swathes of space had vanished from all known charts. "The Oblivion engine was never meant to kill," he said. "That was their mistake. They built it to make the galaxy forget us." "And you turned it against them," Valen murmured. Yannick looked her in the eyes. "No, we turned it against the lie." He walked around the table, his boots echoing. "You've all built this shining piece for centuries, all this order, all this so-called unity, but it was built on a grave and on silence." Valen flinched. "I know that now." Yannick stopped in front of her. "And now that silence is gone, you don't get to pretend anymore?" Across the galaxy, change began to root itself. On Hydrix Station, statues of Coalition founders were quietly taken down, not torn, not smashed, but removed, replaced by small plinths bearing no name, just one phrase: "Memory without truth is nothing but myth." On the Drevi capital, an old professor restructured the entire interstellar history curriculum. For the first time in 300 years, students were taught about the Earth genocide, the purging of refugee ships, the bombings of Terran colonies. It was uncomfortable. It was shameful. But it was real. And in quiet homes, parents whispered to children, "There was a species once, from a place called Earth, and we owe them more than we can repay." Back on Earth, the reclamation had accelerated. Cities once thought lost were unearthed beneath layers of ash and overgrowth. Roads were cleared, water filtered. Towers rebuilt with old steel and new intent. But the humans did not build weapons. They built archives, temples of memory, vaults of the erased, entire structures dedicated to showing, not telling, the truth of what had been done to them. The pain, yes, but also the beauty, the culture, the defiance, the music, the laughter, because the ultimate correction was not destruction. It was remembrance. Yannick stood with Valen on a restored overlook near the ruins of old Paris. The Eiffel Tower was mostly gone. Twisted metal and time had claimed it, but a replica now stood beside it, half-height, polished and new. "This is the first," he said. "We'll build others, not just here, everywhere." Valen glanced at him. "Monuments?" He shook his head. "Warnings." A pause passed. "I don't think the galaxy will forget again," she said. Yannick's smile was thin, bitter. "Oh, they will. Give it time. Peace breeds amnesia. Comfort makes people rewrite pain." Valen lowered her gaze. "Then why stop?" Yannick looked out across the horizon, where old forests were beginning to bloom again, and distant engines hummed in the sky. "Because we remembered. That was the whole point. We didn't burn their worlds. We didn't glass their cities. We just made them face what they buried." He turned to her. "And now, they have a choice." The Coalition, what remained of it, met for the first time in 35 days in a floating satellite chamber above neutral territory. No declarations, no titles, just representatives. And at the head of the table, no human, just a single drive, containing everything: the atrocities, the voices, the screams from orbital evacuations. The children in cryopods that never reached safe harbor, the diplomatic channels begging for help, left unanswered. The entire erased history of Earth. Valen watched as each representative received the data. No speeches were given, because there was nothing left to say. Later, in her private quarters, Valen asked Decker one last question. What will your people do now? He looked at her, quiet and calm. Live. Just that? He nodded. We were never trying to rule the stars. We just wanted our story back. And if someone tries to erase it again? Decker stood, then smiled. They won't get the chance. 10 years later, in a quiet system once called Sector 4 Theta, a child stood before a monument. Her parents were Hydrix. She had never known war. The monument was shaped like a Terran warship. Black, silent, eternal. Etched into the base was a plaque. It read, "This world was once told Earth never existed. Earth told it otherwise." She asked her father, "Was it real?" He nodded. They were the ones who came back. And then she asked, "Why didn't they destroy us?" The father knelt beside her. "Because they didn't want revenge." He pointed at the stars. They wanted truth. Final line. Humanity was never the end of the galaxy's story. They were simply the one chapter the galaxy tried to tear out. But the thing about torn pages is, they leave a scar. And now that scar was seen by all. The explorers found a